Hi, I'm Ellen Morton. I'm standing for SRC President this year. I'm a second year student and I'm studying Gaelic and Sociology.
Ellen, do you think that being overtly political is the SRC's best chance of engaging students?
I think, yeah, definitely, because at the moment the SRC isn't political. It doesn't really seem that relevant quite often to people's lives. If it's political, if it's actually standing up for real issues that affect us as students, I think it's got a much better chance of engaging people because it's talking about things that actually matter to them, really matter to them and really affect their lives. So I think it's really important for the SRC to be political if it wants to have any chance of engaging people at all.
You're a person of the left.
Yeah.
So is there a risk that you, as SRC President, are going to effectively end up alienating people of the centre-left, the centre and the centre-right? I
don't think so. I'm a socialist, I'm a Marxist. That's what I believe in and those are my beliefs. But I don't just believe in standing up for Marxists. I believe in standing up for everyone in society who faces the problems that capitalism enforces on people. So I don't just stand up for Marxists, I stand up for all students. And pretty much most students have to face things like bad housing. Even though Scottish students are exempt from fees, all the international students, all the students from other parts of the UK don't get free education. And as a socialist, I think this is disgraceful. And it affects people who aren't socialists, it affects everyone who has to pay fees.
Right, so you're a Marxist, but you want to stand up for everybody. How are you actually going to do that?
Well, the SRC could be a really strong voice. It has positions on the court, has position on the Senate. It also is allowed to make media statements and things like that. So the SRC could come out and be like, we as the students of University of Glasgow believe in free education. We the students of University of Glasgow believe in better housing for our own students and things like that. And I think that could make a difference and really make sure students' views are heard. Do
you not think the SRC does that already though?
Not really at all. I've never heard them come out, in strong support of free education. The SRC has a really bad record with the bus drivers. Its own bus drivers are on a really exploitative contracts. They're apparently self-employed and they have basically 0 hours work. So I think the SRC is not at all standing up for students' rights.
When it comes to the Contractors agreement which the SRC uses to make use of the minibus drivers service, that is partly driven by necessity, because the SRC's budget is under pressure from the university. If the SRC does not employ these contractors using the Contractors agreement, it would be very difficult for the SRC to fund the services comprehensively as it's currently set up. So given the SRC's budget's under considerable pressure, how would you pay for the minibus service going forward?
I don't think that if the budget's under pressure, we should take that out on the minibus drivers and make them work under disgraceful conditions. I would fight for the minibus drivers to have their rights. I would fight for the SRC's budget to be a budget that actually can work for people and can have services for students and not have really exploitative contracts for their workers.
The SRC had a consultation with the minibus drivers and I think all but one of the minibus drivers did not feel that the terms and conditions that they were being asked to work to were disgraceful. So if the minibus drivers don't think that, if it works for them, is there a case for getting rid of the Contractors agreement, given that it seems to work for them and the SRC is under considerable financial pressure and is driven by necessity?
Well, I think I would go into more consultations with the minibus drivers. As I said before, it's quite a vulnerable contract they're under. Make sure they're not speaking under duress or anything like that. Make sure they're not fearful for their jobs. And try and find a fair contract. Just if they're kind of like, oh, it's all right, it doesn't mean 0 hours, well, basically a 0 hours contract is okay. So we need to really investigate that and make it better.
What reason have you got for thinking that student halls are, to use your term, cash cows for the university?
Well, I don't know how many people here have stayed in student halls. The conditions are pretty poor. They're quite often unclean. They're quite often very poor quality. And they're extremely expensive. And I think this is a disgrace. The hall should be there for students who want to move away from home for the first time, make friends, live in Glasgow. They shouldn't be there just to make money. So
is this a realistic ambition though? Is the university likely to change its stance on student halls?
Well, I think it's important to fight for it. I think it's important to say, look, this is what we have to live with, these are the conditions we have to live with, and make sure the students get a chance to really bring that issue up with the university and not just say, oh, we might not win, so let's not bother. I think we really have to try.
And if the university does not change its stance, how do you think that's going to reflect on you as SRC president?
Well, I think it's important to fight for it, and it's important to get students' views together and work together as a team with the students to fight for what's important to them. I think as long as I do that and I really fight for what I believe in and for students to have better conditions, I think that's what's important.
In your manifesto, you talk about supporting the rights of staff.
Mm-hmm.
What can the SRC president proactively do to support the rights of staff in your view?
Well, as I said before, the SRC president has positions on the Senate and the court, so can use those positions to help fight for the rights of staff. When there's staff strikes going on or things like that, it's important, I think, for the SRC to come out in support of them and to have ongoing consultations with staff about like conditions and things like that, and use its media role and its role within the university positions to make sure staff are fairly treated, fairly paid and respected.
Do you think the SRC is not already doing that? Is that your view? That's why you need to be elected, because it's failed to do this?
I think the SRC has failed to be political overtly. I think it's failed to be a strong voice for students, standing up for the issues that really, really affect them, and I think that's why I need to be elected. Someone new who's not sat in the SRC for years, and someone who really believes in bringing out a big change and making the SRC a voice, a real voice for students. Yeah, so I think I need to be elected.
Are you satisfied that the rectorship at universities like Glasgow has been protected after the Scottish Government's amendment to the Higher Education Governance Bill?
I'm not really sure. I'll have to look into that.
How do you think that, given the Higher Education Governance Bill is going to be one of the biggest challenges facing universities in the next few years, do you think students can have confidence if you don't know the details of the Higher Education Governance Bill at this stage, before it becomes law, while it's being consulted upon?
Well, I think if I'm elected as SRC president, I'll take that very seriously, investigate, and I think one thing is definitely hold more consultations, because at the moment the SRC seems to me and to a lot of other students to be something kind of far away, closed off. So I think it's important, like all these things that will affect us as students are really publicised by the SRC. The SRC is out there trying to engage people and get them to think, what are your views? What do you think about this? What should we do for you?
Given that you don't have any experience on council, how can you reassure people who say that you're too inexperienced to be SRC president? Well,
I think I'm not inexperienced. I have the skills that are needed to be SRC president. I'm involved in activism on campus and off campus. I'm involved in organising things. As I've said previously, I'm in the leadership of the Marxist Student Federation, so I'm used to organising that. In that role, I organise bodies all across the UK. So I've got the organisational skills. I've never been on the SRC council before. I think that's actually a really positive thing, because I've not been in the SRC bubble for years and years and years. I'm just used to being out there with the students, and I know what they think of the SRC and why it's failing to engage so many.
As any former sabbatical officer will tell you, the sheer amount of work that they are expected to do on a day-to-day basis, going to meetings, responding to casework, it takes up a considerable amount of time. Given that a lot of your priorities seem to be around campaigning, how can you guarantee that you are not going to be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of work that the sabbatical officers and the SRC president in particular is asked to do, and remain committed to all the campaigns that you've outlined in your manifesto?
I don't think this will be a problem. First of all, I'm a hard worker, but I think more than that, the reason I want this position, the reason I want to be SRC president, is because I believe that this council needs to change, and that is what my values are, that it isn't representing the students in the way it should be, and it's not fighting for their issues. So that's what drives me. So I can't imagine just dropping all of these responsibilities. I think that'd be really important for me to do.
But then the balancing act between things like daily casework, the queries that SRC presidents get emailed, how are you going to stay on top of things along with all the campaigning objectives that you've outlined? How are you going to ensure that you actually are able to make all of these commitments and do them all and perform them all adequately?
I think I'm definitely able to do all these things. As I've said before, I'm really motivated to do this, and I'm motivated to make the SRC a voice for students. So I'm not going to not do the work just because, you know, it's a little bit of, you know, it's quite a lot of a workload. I think I'm really dedicated to do it and to fight for this SRC to be a real voice for students, and I don't think that will be a problem.
How do you respond to criticism that you're, you know, too political, you're too concerned by the politics of protest to get things done in terms of policy? How do you respond to that criticism?
I don't think I'm too political. I think you need to be political. I think if you're not political, then you're not going to end up addressing any of the issues that affect students. If you're not political, you're not going to be able to engage with the problems of education that's not free, of tuition fees. If you're not political, you're not going to be able to engage with the problems of poor housing and the reasons we have poor housing. If you're not political, you're not going to be able to fight for things like to stop the further education cuts, which is a really important route for many people coming to this university. So I think it's actually really necessary to be political, and to not be political is kind of rejecting part of the role.
Ellen Morton, thank you very much.
Thank you.